Should we be worried? That was the question we called for over the radio. We needed to know if something was coming, and if it is, should we be worried? The short answer? Maybe yes. The long answer, though, it seems as with all the time that has passed, over several decades actually, it seems as though the full humans, what we call them, those who haven't been modified at all, can't seem to keep things together. Even though we have our quiet life here in this village, there seems to be still rogue elements around, and they don't seem to bother us much. But it seems as though things are getting sporting everywhere else. That was relatively to be expected, for a while at least, but you would think it would calm down. I mean, yeah, everything was really dicey for the first couple of years after when that satellite exploded by getting hit by whatever in the hell it got hit by, and it did this to us. Things got, well, difficult to live. After the fuel began to run out, that's when things get really bad. Only a few sections of the planet are able to hold things together as they're not able to move nearly as much. It took a long time to either build new engines or to find a way to get fuel ourselves, even though we're absolutely nowhere near any type of petroleum reserve. And thankfully, this village is one of the few that are staying together. Other villages or towns or cities or what have you across the planet have fallen into anarchy, and usually soon after the bugs show up, well, that's bad. I remember when several of them were at the closest city to here, and it was more than interesting to see them actually have some sort of tactical reasoning as they seemed to flank the army. Thankfully, when I waved to the helicopter and pointed, they were able to make sure that the guys on the ground didn't get overtaken. Although it seems now that even more bugs are heading this way. More specifically, the bugs are heading their way, as in towards the humans. After prodding, we got the rest of the information later. Not to be too specific, we're at the southwest of a base that was actually converted into a human city. It seemed like anybody who hadn't been changed ran to the nearest military facility hoping there was somebody there that could protect them, which they could, but as much as they try, they can't keep everybody from falling back into old ways of stealing, trying to get over on everybody. Even in survival mode, it seems like people just want to get more and more for themselves and to hell with everybody else. And it's getting difficult. A few other areas of humanity that are pulling together, at least you would think so from the outside, seem to be trying to seize territory, and usually this is done via threats or coercion. When that fails, there's good old-fashioned leg breakers, in a sense, using their own military prowess to try and threaten everybody, trying to make sure that everybody just gives up without a fight. Unfortunately, they didn't realize that the base near us, they're not exactly slouches. And as it turns out, the battle I saw that was way off in the distance, turns out that was whoever this other group was coming in and picking a fight with the folks we actually trade with. It's a mess. I'd rather not get into it, but sometimes you just don't have a choice and you're pulled in. Over the last 20 years, it seems as though about half of the human forces that we've ever come across either simply want to open trade or, well, the rest not so much. Given our isolation, we just haven't had to deal with them in a while, but every once in a while you get a group that comes in and thinks they can just take what they want and take out anybody they want. And yeah, flying in and finding a bunch of them trying to chase down one of the canine females, talking about how they're going to hold her tail down or something like that. Along with that, there was a few young ones in there, actually full humans, that were just running for their lives. I very much enjoyed showing them that that's not how shit flies around here. It's amazing that this even actually happens nowadays anyways. Because on top of everything else, it's things to remember is that the bugs still rule. You can't seem to kill them off unless you want to nuke the entire planet, and nobody's that stupid. At least I hope not. You can see them every once in a while. If you fly far enough, you can see them slowly walking across the landscape. Some of them building nests that are just insanely vast and usually very deep. When they do this, they eat everything in the area and simply move on after a season. Or if they're the nomadic type, they just keep going and they just kill everything. The only thing you can do is get the hell out of their way if you're lucky. The worst ones to deal with out of all of them has got to be the wasps, like the ones we faced before. However, thanks to our previous tactics, we became night witches and we simply burned them up. We had to find a way of getting accelerants to make sure this worked, but once we did, oh boy, I enjoyed just diving in the middle of the night and turning their entire nest into a giant bonfire. In fact, the screams of them just torching themselves inside is just enjoyable now. Oh crap, maybe I'm losing my mind. There are a few marauders now, very few. Nomads occasionally, just like the halflings we have now, but they're getting fewer and farther between. We don't know if it's because things had just got so bad or everybody's just kind of working on their own stuff or whatever. It's much more common for creatures like us to show up 1, 2, 3 at a time at most. Refugees that have been flying around, crawling around, slithering around, doing whatever they have to do, but they're living hand to mouth almost the entire time. And because of this, it didn't surprise us that we heard about more due to the halflings that showed up. Our full human compatriots apparently can reach out much farther than us. Whenever they have enough fuel, they actually do a recon flight. Very low, very slow, and usually done with puddle jumpers, but they still are able to get a whole lot better view than I can just on my wings that I just glide through the air. The best I got's maybe 2 or 3 valleys at most in a day. These guys can cover half the state. Thanks to that, they're able to see that there's some sort of band, a group. They don't know if it's marauders, but that's the best guess they got. It looks like they're out there attacking settlements, and from what the recon can actually see, this is bad news because it looks like this group is coming our way. We were definitely pissed when we asked them, when the hell were you going to tell us? There was a look of shame when it came to the convoy commander as he simply stated, we thought they would turn somewhere else, but they're still heading this way. How far is all we wanted to know. He pulled out a map and he showed us. I'm like, oh, so they're 4 valleys away? No, this was the last time we saw them. They're probably here. My eyes got real big. Not only could I see on the map the path of destruction that they were heading their way, but they're going to reach us soon. And it looks like they're going to reach the warren first. Immediately, I stood up, about ready to scream something, but my mind was able to catch up. Everybody knew I was going to say something very important, because I was one of the few that still had military training, even though I did not tell anybody what I did or what my rank was. That is my secret, and it stays with me. I simply paused for a second, calmed myself, and realized we had 2 threats. We had this group of who knows what heading our way, plus we had a giant bug that we had to deal with. So I simply asked, which one is closer? Time-wise, which one is closer? The commander of the convoy simply looked through, and it wasn't 2 seconds before he said, best guess, the warren has about 2 days after the convoy has arrived. And I realized that's not a lot of time. We have less than 24 hours left. I grabbed a hold of all the flyers I could, along with any fast movers we had, any of those who run fast on the ground and were willing to fight, and headed towards the warren to take care of our wabbits. They are not warriors at all, and we need to be sure and make sure their defenses are good before whatever in the hell is there arrive. We sent up flares, and this was a signal for everybody to turn their radios on. Since we don't have the ability to make sure we recharge the batteries really well, sometimes they actually have a centrifugal generator that they use to make sure it's up and running, but they definitely got a hold of us really quick via radio. We immediately called for every single personnel we could to head to the warren as fast as they can. and let them know what was going on. Personnel from every single settlement immediately grabbed what they needed and rushed. We arrived pretty soon after. They're not that far away, but they are secluded enough that they would see anybody coming, at least you would think. As I landed and started asking if anybody was okay, they looked to see everyone landing around them and asked why we're so rattled. I told my youngest to stay here until everybody else arrives. The rest of us are going up to scout to see if we can find these whatever. It takes a second for everybody to get back up in the air as we just can't take off from the ground. We have to either climb up on buildings, which there are none to be climbing up on, or climb a tree that can actually handle our weight. Once we actually get up in the air, we circle around as the wabbits begin to pack. Everything's already been set up as they will now temporarily move in with the halflings. I swear they only wanted the wabbits to move in because, one, they don't hang out with them much, and two, a lot of the halflings think the wabbits are cute. As we circle widely around, I see one of the female lizards start to wave at us. I look over and she signals that there's something there. She's pointing down. As we silently glide across the sky, we're pretty far up, but as we get close, we can see there's a large group. Maybe 30, as best we can guess. Always better to overestimate an enemy's strength than to underestimate it. And we realized that they had spotted us. It's easy to tell, as they had actually stopped and set up a circular perimeter. These guys know what they're doing, was what was going through my mind. I tell everybody to stay up in the skies. I'm going to go talk to them. My eldest wanted to go with me, but I had to remind him that if something went bad, I needed him to be able to drop in and give him hell. By drop in, I meant talons first, and he knew it. With this, everybody simply nodded, and I made my way down. Slowly, making long circles, I lowered my altitude down. Eventually, I was hitting the treetops, and I was able to grab onto a tree and swing down. I was able to sink my talons into the trunk of the tree and climb down with my wings tucked, as though I'm some sort of really long lizard, but kind of the way a squirrel does this. I stay about 50 feet away from the group as I simply climb off the tree, stand there, and simply ask, "Who's in charge?" I look across at the group as they're simply staring at me standing there. The mix of species looks at each other as though they're trying to figure out who's actually in charge. I figured it would be the big guy over there with the horns. To my surprise, a female stepped forward. As I look, I realize she is like me. Tall like me, at least tall for a woman. Thick scales, long tail, her stone face expression on her very human face, it almost distracts from her claws, her very large claws. She's clearly eaten a lot more human than I have, or else she wouldn't look as human as she does, and this is a bit concerning. The piercing gaze of her reptilian eyes tells me she was either born a predator or she became one. Her lack of clothes would have given me thoughts, but not in this situation. She gets about 6 feet away from me and simply looks me up and down slowly. She doesn't smile, she doesn't emote, she doesn't do anything. She's just stone-faced. She asks me, "Are you the leader of this group?" she says as she's pointing up. I simply say, "If there's a leader, I'd be it." She then licked her lips with a tongue that seemed to be so long it almost reached her eyes. Then she simply said, "Good." She stood up as tall as she can and yells, "I challenge you for leadership." Her group then hears this and begins to yell with the idea with a fight. They're all raising weapons in the air, cheering and screaming and roaring into the air until I say, "I refuse." She then looks at me, and I swear, even with a face that's not meant to contort, she says, "You don't have a choice," as she seems to smile just a little bit. Then she flexed out her talons, and I said, "You don't want to do this." She answered, "I assure you, I do." and your body shall nourish me, make me stronger, and perhaps give me wings. I simply sighed. Ugh. I know what you are. I know what you're made of. And unless you've consumed the same creatures I have, you're outmatched. She seemed to take this as a very high affront to herself. She seemed to crouch a little bit, as though she's getting ready for an attack. And I said, okay, before we start, what rules are we going by? She seemed to turn her head just a little bit in confusion. Rules? The first one to die loses! And with that, she charged at me with everything she had. As she got in close, I jumped up, using my wings to push the air down and raise me up higher. And with that, I brought my tail up between my legs and slapped her up under the jaw, slamming her jaw shut. The sudden impact seemed to unbalance her. As I hit the ground, so did she, face first. I landed before she flipped herself over and stepped forward. As she suddenly got back her wits, she flipped over, got back up, scurried backwards, and then propped her leg up and used the tree as almost a springboard to bounce off of. I ducked as she went over my head, using gravity simply to drop me down, and punched up straight into her abdomen. Hard. As hard as I could. If I had used my claws, I guarantee I would have actually pierced her delicate underbelly, but that wasn't my intention. This time, as she hit the ground, she groaned in pain, curling up into a ball as the pain radiated throughout her body. I walked up just a little bit and said, "Are we still doing this?" She looks at me with contempt and pain in her eyes, and then signals to the others with her claw. They immediately raise their weapons, and I say, "Seriously, guys, you cannot be this stupid." I point to the sky and simply say, "Even seen what happens when grenades fall on top of you? The shrapnel is omnidirectional at that point, and you can't hide from the metal fragments that tear you open. And if the concussion doesn't kill you, the blood loss and disease that follow does." The group thinks for a second, looks up, looks at me, looks at each other, and for a moment I wonder what they're going to do. And then a few seem to lower the few firearms they have. The female I just punched in the gut is cursing them before throwing a rock at me. At this distance, I've got more than enough time to catch it. Then she charges again, her movements a bit sluggish as she hasn't recovered from the last strike. As she charges, I simply reach out, grab her face, drive forward, and slam her head into the ground. Her claws begin to tear at my arms, so I toss her into a tree sideways. The resulting double thump, one from her hitting the tree, and the other one of her hitting the ground, resonates throughout the area. She's on the ground as I walk up. Like I said, I'm like you, but I've had plenty of practice taking on creatures like us. She didn't know this, but I actually been training my sons in hand-to-hand combat. Not to mention, I've been training pretty much everybody, to include the female flyers, and they are very vicious. They're actually faster than me, which made it so I knew exactly how this woman was going to come at me. She tries to hit me with her tail at that point, and I simply grab it as she tries to squirm away. I then see no choice but to paste her one right across her face with a solid left hook. As her body pretty much just goes limp from the strike, I stand up and go, "Anyone else?" Seeing no takers, or many of them putting their weapons down, I simply say, "Smart. Besides, I was just stalling anyway." They look at me weird, and I hear a few of them go, "What?" And I simply raise both my hands to the side and say, "Look around you." This new group looks around after being focused on me for so long and realize that my reinforcements had arrived. Not only do they have the flyers in the sky, but now around them they can see a Lamia slowly coming across. She's much larger than they expected. There's also a female centaur holding a shotgun. Then they could see felines, canines, arachne, all circling the group, and all with either weapons that are human-made or humans that come naturally with the body. The group at that point realizes that they're not only outgunned, they're outmaneuvered, outflanked, and out of luck if they don't surrender, so they do. They're then immediately disarmed, and not much ammo was actually left. We still had to search them for other weapons, though, finding a couple hidden blades that I'm sure they hoped we wouldn't find. As I stepped into the group, we found certain personnel that had actually been taken. These weren't actually part of the group. As it turns out, there was 3 young, full human females, a female webbit, and a feline that was far too young to really be there. All of them showing signs of some sort of abuse. Many of them, especially the human females, simply flinched as I went by them. They all had some sort of bruising on them as well, and at least 1 or 2 had collars and chains. We got them separated, and I asked some of the females to take these 5 away, but not before having these 5 point out those who were abusing them. It took a little convincing to let them know that they can actually point them out, as I could see certain glares were coming from this new marauder group. They also looked at me, and I tend to be a little imposing, so I simply got down, not just on one knee, but I got down on all 4s, crumpled in my wings as tight as I could, and actually was there like a dog asking for a treat. It only took one of them to start pointing, and then we simply asked for specifics because they were pointing towards a whole group. Thankfully, they did point out who was doing this. I realized that as they're walking away, some scars are just too deep and are not going to heal. And because of that, my blood was boiling just like everybody else. There was actually 4 of those that they pointed out. A male that looked like some sort of walking cougar, 2 human men, and some old guy that looked like a walking, talking raccoon, although the only thing really raccoon about him was the fact that around his eyes were a dark color. He had the ears, of course. He had whiskers of all things, and that big, bushy tail. To everyone's surprise, the young feline actually claimed that the raccoon had been protecting her from everybody else after the group took her from her recently deceased parents. Hearing this, we realized the raccoon will be judged later. As for the others, their screams could be heard echoing across the valley. The arachne were quick to grab them and wrap them up to be dinner, yet we had to divide them amongst everyone else and break them apart depending on who wanted or needed certain adjustments, because after a large meal like this, we all knew the sleep was going to take over. As for the rest of this group, we walked them back to the village center, and this took a long time. We had to walk, of course, because nobody in that marauding group actually had wings, at least not that I've seen. And of course, I had to carry this dragon female back, and she was not light at all, even for me. No wonder she was the one that wanted to fight. Her scales are just as tough as mine. And of course, I had to carry her because she's too injured to walk, too. I mean, seriously, I hit her hard. She's going to be dizzy for a while. I only say this, too, because it's clear she did not have the same regenerative system I do, or else she would have been able to shake off many of those strikes without any problem. It would have taken less than a minute, and she would have been up and running. I mean, I didn't even cut her open. I just whacked her with my tail and everything. Though if I had to hear one more joke from somebody saying I should have whacked her with something else between my legs, I was going to start using my claws on somebody because it got old really, really fast. Reaching the village center, the new group was immediately given food and medical attention, as they all did look worse for wear. This shocked this new group completely, but not as much as seeing military vehicles inside this village. As it turns out, the convoy had not left yet, which was really good. Apparently, they wanted to see the outcome of our little raid before they even left. Upon receiving food, the group seemed to calm down significantly, and once she was treated, I took the new reptilian friend of ours to be debriefed. As the nutrient-rich food coursed through her veins, she became much more agreeable, and she started to tell us her story. And her story made many of us uncomfortable. Her change was similar to mine, is that she was alone and everything started to break, everything started to hurt, which was common for most, but it seems as though she had changed as much as me. And again, she's eaten much more human, so yeah, she's changed again. Although there is one thing she forgot to do. Apparently, she didn't have any survival training, and she didn't know that she had to stay hidden. Because of that, she was captured while she slept. When they captured her, these full humans used her as a form of entertainment and research. The humans kept checking her blood, seemingly trying to find something to change with. She wasn't the only one who was chained down and treated like this either. She was fed very little as they were afraid she would get too strong and break free, and they would do things to her while she slept. That's what she said, and her voice got very, very low. And every time she spoke about that, she glared at the full humans that were in the room. When one of the females said it must have been a horrible experience, she mentioned that she didn't actually experience it. As it turned out, she said she would wake up to her lower parts hurting a bit and men holding an egg. This is when she started to cry, and as she did, the Lamia held her hand and told her she didn't have to cry because she was actually wrong. Everybody paused because we knew what was going on. She told our young dragon lady, "It's normal for females like us to ovulate when we hibernate." The young dragon simply said, "What?" Needless to say, this realization actually raised her spirits, realizing that she had not been taken advantage of while she slept. She realized that they had not done this. They were just trying to figure out what the hell was going on. As it turned out, though, she and the others had been kept in a zoo. The raccoon man actually was able to pick the locks and escape, as he was actually a locksmith back before that happened to him. When he was able to free all the other captured personnel, the captured personnel treated their captors poorly. Even the Minotaur of the group, who was usually a really calm guy, seemed to have completely lost it and gave them the hard goodbye after giving them the business by shoving his hoof right up their after filling their stomachs with the captors, as they just didn't have a lot of food around. They moved out of that hell and just went about. They tried to find another settlement, but most other settlements were human and would just shoot at them. They realized it was survival of the fittest at this point and went completely nomadic and mostly feral, as they were basically starving the entire time. They decided that there was no good people that still exist. There was simply surviving and nothing else. And when your mind is like that, the only thing you can do is keep moving forward. The ladies helped to calm her down a little more as we interjected. We informed all of them that there are other nomadic groups still out there, just they're not as plentiful as they used to be. We offered to take them in if they're willing to play by the rules. If not, they can try their luck out again. And with all the bug nests around, one of which they had been running from, we suggested they choose very carefully. And we reminded them, this isn't Sophie's choice. This new group ended up staying in the barns that night, and we had to keep watch on them. Thankfully, most of the flyers were good for several days before they'd have to sleep again, so it was easy for them to watch over everything. After this new group went to sleep, the rest of us discussed it, and we discussed it also with our full humans. The question was simple. What should we do? One of the young canines simply yelled out, "We should just eliminate them, make it a public display. I mean, this is the reason why we are still called monsters. I mean, am I wrong?" He asked that as he looked at the convoy commander. We continued to discuss this, as there were points being put all around, and it wasn't until later, about 2 hours, that our decision on what to do was made for us. A call from the human settlement changed everything. Hello everybody, this is Syntax. Thank you so much for joining me on this latest chapter of They Call Us Monsters. Before I go, I need to send out some thank yous to a few of my supporters, and those would be MTF Guard, Erica Gem, Guardian Sage, SS Demon, Brian Kemp, Sir, Chris Dixon, and Cause Lynn. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I will see you on the next one. This is Syntax, ejecting.